Hi, everyone. We're going to give you a few more minutes to join us. Thank you for joining us for the ATAP webinar this morning. Live stream, excuse me. We're calling it live stream now. We are pleased to have you with us and just want to say thank you to Eightfold for their generous sponsorship of the ATAP live stream today. Eightfold AI delivers a talent intelligence platform, the most effective way for organizations to reach top performers, upskill and reskill the workforce, recruit top talent efficiently, and reach diversity goals. Eightfold AI's deep learning artificial intelligence platform empowers enterprises to turn talent management into a competitive advantage. For more information, you can visit www.eightfold.ai. And we are so pleased that you could join us for this conversation. My name is Kristen Leblanc. I'm with ATAP. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to thank Eightfold again for their generous support of ATAP. If you aren't yet familiar, ATAP is the only membership association for all professionals working in talent acquisition. So if you are a recruiter or a sourcer, if you work in candidate engagement, social media strategy, employer branding, any of those, you'll find a home within ATAP. So for today's content, we are excited to hear from Todd Raphael and Rebecca Warren from Eightfold on their presentation called Taking Your Talent Acquisition Teams from Stressed Out to All In. And I'm reading the title and it's different from the slide, so I apologize for that.
Sorry.
Now is the time. That is okay. I was like, oops, I got this wrong. It's my fault. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca and to Todd so they can get us kicked off. And looks like we have a good attendee. So I'm going to let you guys do your thing.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here. My name is Rebecca Warren. I've been at Eightfold for a little over a year now in the customer success space. Previous to Eightfold, I was in talent acquisition for 15 plus years, maybe not going to say how many pluses, in a variety of industries and leadership roles. I love TA, so this was a really good move for me to move to Eightfold to be able to continue with all of the talent acquisition knowledge that I have, stay connected to the space, but then also bring that success focus to our clients. All right, Todd, over to you.
Thanks. My name is Todd. I've been at Eightfold for 2.5 years, and prior was for about 25 years was managing publications and conferences for talent acquisition leaders as well as HR generalists as well.
And if you are not already connected to us on LinkedIn, we highly recommend you go out and just shoot us a connection. We'd love to connect with you. All right, so let's jump in. What are we talking about? So as we highlighted in the title, we're looking at stressed out recruiters. How do we take our recruiters from and talent acquisition professionals from stressed out to all in? So if we think about what is happening in TA right now, it's a little crazy, right? There's COVID outbreaks, continuous policy changes, talent acquisition teams are growing, changing, folks are moving into new roles, new spaces, large number of open positions, as well as a very demanding and candidate-driven market. So there's a lot that's going on that could push folks to the limit. Now, all of that kind of focuses on the dark side. Todd, tell us about what the silver lining could look like in this space.
I think there's a pretty big silver lining, which is that this is in some ways the best of times for recruiting and for talent. The pay is higher, the demand is higher. It's one of the hottest jobs there is, whether it's the top 1 or top 5, top 10. It's a hot job. It's a more respected job. I think there's just a big and growing recognition that recruiters and talent grow companies and keep people. And that's a big change, and it's an important and positive change.
Yeah, nice time to maybe try a new industry, move into a different space, learn something new, because there is such a demand for talent acquisition professionals. Totally agree. So all of that being said, really aligns with the idea of now is the time to shift your organization's approach to talent acquisition. You know, TA started out way back, right, with not being called talent acquisition, was called selection, it was called recruiting. There was a lot of names we had for it, personnel, right? There was less focus on talent acquisition and more about let's just get the people in the door, right? It was ads in the newspaper. It was sending things in by fax and snail mail. It was emails that we were trying to keep track of candidates. And so we've been doing things a certain way for a long time. And now is a prime time for us to shift on how we look at things. And we have a couple of different buckets that we want to look at where organizations should be or are shifting. So number one, attitudes and assumptions, hiring managers, leadership, and TA professionals. Who and when we hire, we're going to talk about that as well. And then how talent acquisition professionals are viewed by the industry as well as by leaders. So we're going to go ahead and pop up a poll here for you. And the first question that we would love to hear from you on is what keeps you awake at night regarding work? And we'll talk a little bit about the outside of work in a second, but go ahead and grab a choice here, pick the top one. All of these might be on your mind, but shoot the top one to us so that we can see what you're thinking and feeling. And Kristen, we'll let you keep an eye on that poll to see when the responses start dropping, and then you can go ahead and share the results.
Sounds good. I'll give it another second. So.
All right.
Okay. Oh, one more.
All right, so it looks like a couple of folks are hanging around in sunshine and roses. Kudos to you. Feel free to throw in the chat what you're doing to keep your life stress-free. That's awesome. Looking at a mix of the other things, interestingly enough, the expectations of candidates is lower, but it's that expectations of hiring leaders. Todd, what do you think about that coming up as our top number?
That's interesting. I think, it could say a number of things. My sense is that we, being like those of us who are connected in some way to this talent field, are talking a lot about what needs to change and how your talent, your requirements need to change, your degree requirements need to change. You need to look in different pools of people. You need to focus on skills. All those kinds of things have been talked about to a great degree among talent people. I don't know, maybe that hasn't filtered fully down to hiring managers, and they're kind of doing things similar to an old way. Right. That's my hunch there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So the next slide that we have leads right into that in terms of what we are seeing kind of from an old school perspective, and then looking at how do we move from that to a different way of doing things. And so feel free as we go through these, if there's any in the chat that really resonate. Kristen is watching that and she can certainly shout out, or if there's comments that you want to add on this, let us know. But the passive candidate idea is becoming less and less of a thing, right? It used to be where hiring managers say, we have to have passive candidates. Anyone who's looking isn't going to be as good. And we know in today's day and age, anyone can find anyone, and everyone is open to an opportunity for the right either price, time, benefits, whatever. So the idea that we have hiring managers holding on to of passive candidates are better, we really need to move away from that. And that is coupled as well with the emphasis on narrow requirements. I know when I hired for a large company in the past, it was my candidates can only come from these 6 schools, and they have to have moved 3 different times in their career path, and they have to have gone, have to have been in this particular space, lots and lots of rules and restrictions, which really narrows the talent pool. And in today's day and age, narrowing those to exclusion causes you to miss out on some really good candidates. Any thoughts you have on those 2 things, Todd?
Yeah, on the passive one, I would just add that our customers are finding that somewhere between 30 and 70% maybe of the people that they're hiring, who they think when they do hire someone from the outside, from like a poaching kind of, that person turns out to be in their talent network anyhow. In other words, there's not a real difference between passive and active.
That's
The
right.
person you think is not looking for a job either actually is open to it, or in many circumstances applied to work at your company a year ago or 2 years ago. And you can start with that and not necessarily from the outside, and you're going to find the same person essentially.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much more accessibility to information, and there's more communication around it too. It doesn't feel like it's got to be so secret if you're looking for a new gig. So yeah, good call out. So the other two bullets we have here, again, are things that are not helpful to getting the right people in the door quickly. That drawn out interview process. How many of you have gone through the fight with your hiring managers or your leadership saying, we're not going to do 8 interviews and 6 panels and 3 assessments, and it's not okay for it to take 3 months, right? With that next bullet point of everyone wants to work here, a lot of folks in the hiring space would say, oh, everyone wants to work here, so of course they'll wait for us. That's not true. That's not the case. Maybe it was in the past, but not any longer. So drawing out that interview process, making it complicated and cumbersome, and assuming that everyone will wait for you are things that would cause candidates to ghost faster than anything. And so some ideas to think about, to share with hiring managers, with leadership, things to think about as you go through your process, shifting that from to to, is the number one thing, and I think is critical in all jobs that you have, is building trust with your hiring managers or with your clients or with your stakeholders, however you want to think about that. But building trust with them so that they know that you have their best interest in mind. And when you say, hey, I really want you to talk to this person, their background is non-traditional, they're going to trust you, they're going to believe you. And one of the other things that helps is using any kind of data that you have. So Eightfold is great for that because we do have a lot of data around why somebody would be a good match, looking at their skills, their background, and all of the work we've done to understand those adjacencies. But then the next point I have on the slide here is that use and share market data on candidate availability. So a lot of times hiring managers will say, oh, that's great. Thanks for sending me these. What else do you have? Who else is out there, right? That idea of FOMO. When you look at market data and you can share, hey, this is a really niche position and there's only 6 people who do this in the area, maybe we need to think differently. When you use that market data, where those candidates are, what they're doing and what they're interested in, that also helps you build trust with your hiring managers. Thoughts on those things, Todd, before we go to the last 3?
No.
Okay, perfect. So let me just finish those there. We're going to talk about these personas and skill-based hiring, SLAs, in a couple of the next slides, but looking at different ways to present candidates, looking at their skills differently, taking it away from just looking at a resume, makes a big difference in hiring managers understanding a different profile for your candidates. Setting SLAs and clearly communicate. This to me was one of the biggest things that helped me in my past life in TA, was being really clear with your hiring managers. This is how long the process is going to take. Here are the steps. Making sure that they know what's happening and when tends to take a lot of that angst out of the process. And then streamlining that application process. It seems like a lot of times leadership wants to add more things in, and we want to continue to take things out. From a candidate perspective, taking things out, asking the questions later on in the process, moving the assessment, even moving the application to further in the process, tends to help folks get engaged and excited about continuing and then filling out those forms or taking those assessments.
So Rebecca, we've got a couple questions. Do you want to pause now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we've got a question on the drawn out interviews. We have gotten pretty good in some areas of the org, but for more technical roles, we have had some pushback from leaders.
Yeah. And I think for technical positions, that is fair, right? But how can you make that as quick as possible? So if that's going to be a barrier to entry, if they don't have those tech skills, then how do you use maybe a technical platform instead of having a technical interview? How do you have them do a quick assessment and then move them to the next step? How do you automate your process to get folks through that process more quickly? And there has to be something in it for them, right? I know if I'm applying for a job and I look at something and the first thing they want me to do is a 45 question assessment that's going to take me an hour and a half, I'm like, peace out, I'm not doing that. So how do you engage them in the process? Maybe the assessment comes along with a conversation with your recruiter, saying ahead of time, like, hey, this is really important, appreciate that, follow up as soon as you're done.
Great, thank you. There's also any thoughts on the rec load in this market?
The rec load, right? And it depends on, of course, what's happening in your space, on how many positions are open. Let's hang tight to that question. We have some things to address that coming up later on in the presentation. But great question. Kristen, will you make sure I don't forget that one?
Yes, absolutely. And one more, what tools do you like for getting market data?
So there's a couple of ways to do that, and I think what might be better is we can go ahead and shoot that out to you with some ideas in the email that goes out after. There's some tools that I've used in the past. I think Talent Neuron is good. I know LinkedIn Insights is helpful. We have some capability connected into our platform as well. So there's a couple that are out there, but we'll go ahead and shoot that out in that final email because there are some tools that cost more than others and some that are easy to access. Great questions. Y'all are making me work here. I love it. It's awesome. All right, so let's talk about this next page here. Shifting these assumptions of going from a resume to looking at a persona. So I know this is an eye chart. You will get these slides and you'll be able to look at this. But this is something that I created from one of my past roles working in the restaurant industry. We had a lot of folks in our district leadership looking at success profile. A success profile is the only way to find great people. So they said, somebody in this role looks like this and has come from this place, so we only want to hire this profile. And if you look at what you see on the screen here, that tended to be what was over on the right. And so that Terry, we just came up with some names here, but that Terry of having lots of leadership experience, lots of career progressions within restaurants, lots of team management, working directly with hiring and career progression. All of those pieces were what our leaders were saying, we only want to hire from this bucket. And so we within TA really pushed on that to say, hey, let's look at a persona. Let's look at the skills they have to have, not what their resume looks like, not what restaurant companies they've worked from, but what do they need to be successful? And when we were able to distill that down, we put together these profiles to say, you could have someone who is on a Jordan, right? Not a lot of restaurant background, but understands leadership, is driven, hungry, ready to learn. Taylor, not as much restaurant background, but maybe has a degree and has maybe led some teams. Casey, having leadership experience inside of restaurants, but not as much as Terry. Looking at a profile as a persona, as opposed to you have to have this particular background, this particular resume. This helped us open up who we were hiring. And what we had inside of TAs, we said, we're going to have at least one non-traditional, one non-Terry candidate on every slate. So if our idea was we wanted to have 3 candidates for our hiring managers to choose from, one of them had to be either a Jordan, Taylor, or Casey. And that really helped us think differently inside of TA, but also helped our hiring managers hire different levels of people, add in different levels of experience, and really build out what their leadership team looked like in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Todd, thoughts on this?
We did a lot. I think you were not at Eightfold yet for some of this. We did a lot in 2020 and 2021 pro bono, working with people who'd been laid off from restaurants, hotels, airlines, rental cars, and so on, trying to match them with growing companies like Instacart and others that were still hiring and hiring a lot. And it was interesting because we talked to actually restaurant employees, like assistant general managers, for example, at the beginning, and they'd say, to be honest, like all I know is food. But then when you kind of probed further, they didn't just know food, they knew hiring, influencing people, morale, budgeting, inventory, customer service, and so on. And so it kind of goes to show that even people themselves don't really always have a sense or realization of how many skills they have that can be applied to other industries, let alone companies who are hiring someone else. I just saw 2 days ago, Accenture did a study that showed, I think that people think that they have around 11 skills. If we're asked, what skills do you have? We tend to list around 11. And the number of skills that people tend to have is actually like around double or triple that.
Right.
So it kind of just goes to show that not only do companies forget about some of the skills that can be reapplied and transferable, but we forget ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And there may be a lot of things that we do that we don't put on a resume. We may create a resume because we think this is what this particular company is looking for. And we may not even highlight the things that they are really focused on. So looking at a profile or what ability someone has as opposed to what they've listed on a resume is going to get you a broader sense of who can do the job, and also build some of that that career progression as well. If you're not only hiring senior folks in the space, but hiring folks who are up and coming, they can learn from each other and it makes your team stronger. Yeah, great call out.
So we've got a couple more questions too.
Okay.
Who builds the personas, TA or the hiring manager?
We did inside of TA in partnership with marketing, and we did a lot of research from the hiring managers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you avoid bias when using candidate personas? For example, a university degree may exclude many talented people that have the experience, but not the degree.
Right. And I think that's a great call out. And there's a lot of organizations. I have several clients that I work with through Eightfold who have early career programs as opposed to campus recruiting. And so the way we built it over here, if you look at Jordan, has maybe no degree or a 2-year degree, but has that leadership experience. So looking for that non-campus background, I think is really important as well, to give folks an opportunity to do, to get into spaces where maybe a degree would have limited that before.
I think if you're just, you're sitting down at the intake meeting, you're saying, what will this person need to do on the job? So therefore, what skills do they need? And what potential do they have to do this? You don't end up typically with saying, oh, well, they need a degree. You might end up saying, well, they need the skills that you would have probably got by getting a degree, or you could have gotten those skills elsewhere. But ultimately, as long as you have those skills and those potentials, that's what's important. It's not the piece of paper.
Right. And let's be honest, there's potential for bias in every process, right? We all have biases. So it's how do you make them as neutral as possible, and how are you aware of them? For instance, when we were looking initially, when I started at one of the restaurant companies I worked for, there was a list of the restaurants companies that they should come from, right? An A tier were these 6 companies, a B tier were these 6 companies. And if you were down in that D tier, it was like, that's a terrible company to come from. But there are great people in every company. So whether or not that brand is one that particular hiring manager liked, we tried to take that out of the process and say, to what you were saying, Todd, let's look at what skills they have, regardless of where they've done it, what can they do to help make this organization better? Yeah, we could talk about this all day long. Feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat more if you have questions about the personas, for sure. Another piece that has really helped out when we think about setting those expectations with your hiring managers. I know I used to have hiring managers that would say, okay, so we're going to have, right now we've got March 10th. We want this person hired by the end of the month. Hiring manager, let's have a conversation. Let me tell you what goes into our process so that you can understand what's going to come out of your process. And so created just a really high level, service level agreement to say, here's typically how long each process should take, right? Each step should take between attraction, identification, evaluation, selection, and then assimilation. Now, of course, these are all ranges, but being really clear with your hiring managers on what they can expect from you, and then making sure that you're delivering back to them as well, really helps to build those strong relationships so that they can trust you. And it may be, right, you're going through sourcing, and we have here for a standard position, it would take you about 7 days. And you can go back at the end of the 7 days and say, hey, here's what I'm finding. Here are my challenges. Using data to share again where candidates are, what you're finding, what are you looking at. You can say, hey, this is taking me a little bit longer, but at least you have a guideline for your managers to not set these unrealistic expectations that you can't win with. So this gives you an idea between you and the hiring manager, what you can expect from them, what they can expect from you, and also set that realistic date for you to have somebody, an offer accepted and a button seat. Thoughts on this, Todd, before we move on?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit here about skills versus a job description. And we talked about skills versus a resume. Todd, do you want to talk a little bit about what the difference is between hiring for skills versus hiring for a resume or a job description?
I mean, resumes and job descriptions have been kind of talked about for years as because of all of their flaws, right? For job descriptions tend to be vague. They tend to have a lot of phrases about being passionate and being a rock star. And we're looking for someone who's a self-starter. We want someone who's a team player. These things have been talked about for a long time. Most job descriptions really don't tell you a whole lot. Resumes similarly leave off, we touched on this a minute ago, but they tend to leave off a lot of what a person can do. When I talked about the Accenture study about skills, resumes tend to capture the outcome, but they typically leave off a lot of what you can do. For example, a teacher's biography might say that they improve student test scores and they have been teaching for 20 years and something like that. But they forget many of the skills they have, like keeping people from not being distracted or translating complex concepts simply. And those are the kinds of things that could make a great product trainer if you're a teacher. But again, they're like second nature to teachers, so they don't really describe them on the resumes. So the effectiveness of resumes and job descriptions is pretty low. The alternative is some sort of a calibration in an intake meeting where you sit down or you virtually sit down with a hiring manager. And again, as touched on earlier, you say, what does it take to do this job? What skills might a person have, or at least they have the potential to do these things? And it really changes the way you think. It changes everything because you start going, oh, what is our talent pool like when we focus on these skills? And maybe you add in a degree requirement and then your pool changes, becomes dramatically less diverse. And you say, I don't know, do they need that master's degree? Could it be a different master's degree or no master's degree? Maybe they do, but in many times you say, oh, maybe they don't at all. They need the skills that they would have gained from that degree, not the degree itself. We just had a customer in a webinar, I think it was like a week ago, who, as an example, was looking for someone with some data science experience. And they found someone who was in the military, I think it was the Navy, and that person had nothing about data science on their resume at all, and no official degree listed or anything about data science. But I guess they had in the military used data science and were perfect for the job, and they were hired and successful. But they were flagged, I guess, by the AI, which recognized that someone in that job must have that data science experience. But that's an example of where it's not necessarily a resume or a job description that's effective. It's really sitting down and saying, what are the skills you need, and what kind of people might have those skills?
Yeah, 100%. And when you think about that, sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what that right match is. I know I worked for a home shopping company years back, and they were looking for someone who could help analyze data, is somewhat similar, who could analyze data for the customers. But there wasn't anybody out there who had done that, right? Home shopping is a very small niche. I was able to find somebody who had a PhD in agronomics, who did a lot of that predictive analytics, who had done a lot of the different things that they needed, and was able to bring them over and got them hired at a home shopping network. It takes a lot of time, but if you can focus on the skill sets that they need instead of, as you said, the particular degree or the companies that they've worked at, you get a much better fit and you get your work done inside the organization a lot more effectively.
I was on the line with a company very late Monday night in South Africa, and financial services, and so we were talking, and bartenders, and this has been said before, but bartenders have been effective in their customer service roles. So again, another example, it's not about the title you had, or the degree you had, the certification you had, the credential you had. It's about what you can do, what you have done, what you're capable of doing. That's
right. Any questions or anything in the chat, Kristen, before we move to our next bucket?
No, just a couple comments. A few minutes ago, we were using this since 6 months and building personas in TA while applying transformative marketing processes, but that traditional is used for customers, but the non-traditional candidate is something we need to add. And then another comment, the trade-offs for skills can depend on the team's appetite and ability to train up on the missing areas. Often I have supported teams that are too thin to help fill in the gaps.
100%, and that is fair. So there's a couple things we'll talk about on our third bucket, but totally agree. You have to make sure you have the bandwidth to do that, for sure. Okay, so we're going to pop up another poll here. What is your organization's stance on remote work? So once Kristen pops that poll up, you'll be able to see what some of the options are. And you can pick as many as you'd like. And then once those answers come back in, we'll chat. We, all three of us, were chatting before this that we have a particular point of view on where we think the world should land forever, but we'll wait and see what your responses look like, and then we can chat about that.
Ooh, this is very exciting.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, a couple more seconds, so you can go ahead and vote.
Perfect.
Okay, and there we go.
All right. So looks like a good mix, right? A couple of folks are at 100% in the office, which we're talking about that as well. A lot of companies are starting to set that date of what that looks like and expectations. Looks like there's some remote in there. Good to know that everyone on the poll knows what the policy is. I think this is a hot button for a lot of folks, but it looks like the biggest number landed around that hybrid, some days in the office and some remote. Todd, what do you think about that? And what do you think hybrid really means?
I mean, this isn't a good or bad comment, but it makes me kind of wonder how that plays out. So for example, if you say you're hybrid, does that mean you're hiring people who can work anywhere? And if so, if you're saying you can come or should come in the office certain days, but if you are hiring someone anywhere, then maybe you can't come in the office or at least the headquarters certain days.
Right.
You may work anywhere. You may be 8 hours away from an office or depending on the car or plane. So hybrid just raises questions about how that works. Are you making sure that everyone's on a level playing field? I guess is the bottom line.
Right.
Or maybe you're not hiring people regardless of where they live. Maybe you're hiring people who are only within a certain proximity to the office or to an office if you have multiple kind of satellites.
Right.
So I don't know, it just raises a lot of questions, which is not suggesting that hybrid is bad.
Yeah. There's just some work that has to go into it, and a lot of work that we wouldn't have thought about doing 2 years ago. So there's a lot of challenges. I will say that one of the reasons I came to Eightfold was because our role was able to be 100% remote. And so I sit in outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Todd, you're in LA. Kristen on the call, right? You're in DC. We're all over the place. But I really found that it was important to me to live where I want to live, and the work will come. So Eightfold being 100% remote has really opened up a lot of doors. And I know that there's a lot of challenges for folks on what that looks like, depending on what their jobs are. But it certainly is a hot button. So if you look at that next slide here, I found these yesterday, and some of you may have seen these already. Hannah is not a fan of working back in the office. All of these things, Kristen and I were talking about that, you know, we're on the yoga team forever, yoga pants team forever team. But then you have on the other side, right, you have got someone saying, hey, it feels nice to be back in a proper work environment. So there certainly are perspectives on both sides, and we'll continue to see what that looks like as we go forward. So if we look at then our next area that we want to look at is who and how we hire, and that poll question fits very well into that. This next slide here is a quote from a friend of mine in talent acquisition that said, when asked about candidate attractions, that I can confirm that paying the same and looking for folks to work in the office is not the way. So there's a lot of struggles right now with what candidates are looking for which may be very different than what hiring managers expect or what leadership thinks should happen. And clearly, conversations over the last 2 years have made the candidate priorities shift and change and focus very differently. So if we look at what candidate priorities we're hearing and seeing, I'm certain that you're seeing a lot of these as well. So feel free to chime in if you've got any comments here. Flexibility, we just spent some time talking about that, where people work, how they work, when they work. That has become such a criteria and a priority for folks. I know for me, being able just to take a break and walk out, whether it's walking out to the backyard, or maybe I can take a quick loop around the neighborhood, unload the dishwasher, right? Just give me a break in between meetings. That to me is important. And I really like being in the house that I've paid money for, right? So candidates are clearly looking for a different way to do work, but that doesn't always mesh well with what leadership thinks should happen. So I know that can be a challenge when you're looking for bringing folks into the interview process. Relevant benefits. This one is interesting because benefit total rewards has always been an interesting thing to think about. What do candidates want? What's important? How much is it going to cost, right? There's all of those things to think about. What I've been hearing over the last couple of years, especially as COVID has ticked up and people are moving, living in different places, adding in a broader definition of family. I know folks struggle when they say, hey, my best friend just died and I've been living with her for 2 years and I don't get bereavement leave, but yet my grandpa, who I haven't seen in 10 years, I get 2 days to go see him, to go to that funeral. So a lot of folks are looking for what does that definition of family look like, and being more supportive on whatever your support system looks like, supporting you, supporting employees in that. So that may be something to think about. What does that look like at your organization? Now, Todd and I had a really good conversation about this increased mental health care. And from my perspective and looking at it from the organizations I've been working at during the pandemic, to me, it was about how do we provide more options for folks to connect, right? Especially if you're not in an office now and you're used to going in, you're at home, you're just with the cat. It's a little bit much. You don't have that same interaction. Thinking about, can we add additional mental health visits to your healthcare plan? Can we give you access to a mental health app for you to be able to have that additional conversations? And Todd, share what you brought up. I thought it was such a great point on if you are going to increase your mental health care offerings, what that could look like to some folks.
Yeah, I was just saying that astute candidates, which are like all candidates now, can see that. And I'm not suggesting that therapy is bad, mental health benefits are bad, but they can see that. And when they hear you emphasizing all of your mental health benefits, and someone comes in and does a 15-minute massage and you've increased your mental health benefits and that kind of thing, it can, for these candidates, astute candidates, send a message that there's something amiss, that you need these mental health benefits.
Wrong?
Most employers tend to spend time on addressing the symptom of a problem and not preventing the problem, right? So what is wrong? Like, why are you having these benefits in the first place?
Right. What's going on in your organization that's going to make us crazy that we need these things? Yeah,
you see companies taking a week off, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily. Right. It's not really how most people think of life. Their life tends to happen, whether it's their children's, recitals or whatever children have, or their football games, or their dropping off the mail, the prescription, the parents. Those things don't really happen in like a week, a year, where you get them all done and then you're done and you're back to work. Like, that's not really what candidates want. So some of these things, which may not be bad ideas and may be well-intentioned, tend to not really address the root of the problem. They tend to just put a Band-Aid over the problem.
Well, and the other thing to think about is, how are you going to message that, right? If you didn't have them a couple of years ago and you do now, what are you going to share to say to your employees and to your candidates, where they understand why these things have been now added to your portfolio, right? So how are you going to message it? That's important as well. And then looking at the pets, daycare, volunteering, how are you going to add different things in, especially when folks have been remote, more folks got pets. Daycare continues to be a challenge. What are you thinking about inside your organization that could help ease the burden on folks, especially if you're looking at a hybrid or 100% back in the office? So different ways to think about total rewards and maybe different benefits than we were thinking of in more of a traditional sense in the past. And then employee experience, and these are things that we're continuing to see more of, and certainly a huge focus when it comes to our organization. So Todd, talk a little bit about upskilling and reskilling, especially when it comes to employees and organizations.
It's a candidate priority, but it's also a company priority, right? So every company is in transition, as we all know. They're all changing their business models and what they need to do. Whether it's an energy company or clothing or restaurants, being more delivery, everyone's changing. And so companies need people who can adapt and learn new skills. And candidates, they're again, astute enough to see that as well. They kind of know that every company is in transition, that what the company is going to be doing a year or two from now or 5 years from now is not going to be exactly what they're doing now. And so they want to know they can kind of change with the company and grow with the company. The company won't be saying, oh, we don't need you anymore. We need someone different with these new skills. Instead, they want to be seen as someone who's going to kind of grow with the company and take on slightly different skills in the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of learning opportunities do you have, whether they're mentorships or different internal projects, whether it's external courses that you can take? How are you pouring into your employees to help them not only build their career, but also help your organization get ready for the shift that's coming in the next couple of years and make sure that you're ready to meet those demands? For sure. And then the buckets that we have over here on the right side, those really we look at as more of table stakes, right? You want to come to an organization and do meaningful work. And so how are you thinking about this job that you're asking someone to do? How does it add to the overall values of the organization? How does it tie into the mission and the vision, making sure that folks understand how valuable that role is. And then, of course, that strong culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are all really important things that organizations should make sure that they're highlighting every time you're looking to attract someone to your company. So here are some things just to think about, actions you can take today to change who and how you hire. So we talked about this already in our first area of faster process, more transparency. This, I'm just going to throw this out there and we can chat about this on LinkedIn or later on. How do you help folks understand compensation? We in TA, I think, have always had that hold it close to the vest, and there's a lot of back and forth about show me your W-2s, or I'm not going to tell you my compensation until we get to the very end, right? And neither of those are very productive. So how can you move your process along, more transparency on what's happening, what compensation looks like, et cetera? Training non-traditional candidates, and this came up, and that was one of the questions of how do you put in the plug for saying, hey, this is important. And I would say, and I've heard this from hiring managers, I don't have time to train. I need someone to hit the ground running, is an athlete, right? All of those cliches. But I think the other question to back up and let's get to what the root of you're trying to solve is that if you don't take time to train, you're not going to make your organization better, right? You're going to hire someone else's trained person. And that also comes into question. So are you not confident in your ability to train someone to do the job the way you need it done? So I think there's some things to push back on there. You may not have time. You say you don't have time to do it, but do you have time to continue to hire to fill that job if you're not training them in the way that you need them to be trained? Evaluate comp, we talked about that already. Hire 80% of what you need. So this goes into some of that non-traditional candidates or looking at level of experience. I have always talked to my TA teams about not looking for someone with 100% and pushing back on hiring managers who say everything on this job description is required. Because if you hire somebody at 100%, I call that person a consultant, right? You need to have some room in that person's career path for them to learn things. You also want them to be able to contribute to the organization in a meaningful way. So not looking for someone who has everything, but helping your hiring managers to prioritize what's critical and then what are those things that are nice to have that also adds to the diversity inside of your organization. You want folks to come in and stay, not come in, feel like, oh, there's nothing more for me to learn here. I already know it all. I've already told you what I think. You can choose what you want to do and then you leave, right? So how do you make sure that you're retaining folks longer than that? And then empower and reward sourcing outside of the company. So those are two things. So the first piece, when I'm talking about empowering folks, think about every single person in your organization as a recruiter. How can you equip them to be able to go out and talk to folks wherever they are, right? As recruiters, sourcers, we do that all the time. Every single place I go, I know what you do, I know where you work, I know what you're looking for. I'm always asking those questions. How do you empower everyone in your organization to have the tools to be able to do that, to pull in referrals, to drive folks to your organization? And then rewarding sourcing outside of the company. This actually has worked really well for me in my last couple of roles, is reaching out to your LinkedIn network and say, hey, who do you know that I might want to talk to? If we hire somebody that you refer to me, you don't work for my company, but if you refer someone to me and I hire them, we'll get you a bonus, whether it is, for instance, from a restaurant company, whether it's, $50 or $100, $250 to eat in our restaurants. You're building that brand as well as giving them a benefit, or whether it's a Visa gift card or whatever it might be. Building up your external connections to help you build that brand. If you think about that, a $250 gift card to wherever is way cheaper than pulling in a third-party agency or having that position continue to churn. So pulling in all of your resources to help build up your candidate pool is a quick, easy way to pull in the folks that are potentially good fits that will cost you the least amount of money.
So before we keep going, I just wanted to one quick question. Someone says many companies are struggling with training/upskilling and promoting internal talent pool. This is likely contributing to the high turnover numbers. Any tools and best practices to assist leadership with fully utilizing internal talent?
Yes, Eightfold. Talk to Eightfold. And I say that as being a little silly, but truly the Career Hub process that we have is amazing. Like when I joined, and right away I had my resume in there and I put in some key skills, areas that I thought I was good at and areas that I wanted to grow into. And we were able to, right away, I got connected to a couple of options for mentors. I opened myself up to mentor others. There were projects, and I've never worked in an organization where I saw it this way, where there were projects that were completely out of my wheelhouse, right? Very technical projects or in areas of the business I didn't have any visibility to, but had been opened up inside the organization for me to join, that they wanted somebody with the TA customer success background to add value. There were ways to connect that I had just never thought about. And Todd, I'll stop for a second and let you answer this, but Eightfold to me as one of the best engagement platforms for employees that I've ever seen.
I think in addition to the technology, you need a culture change a little bit. And Asha Childs, our CEO, was talking to me about this. We were in the kitchen the other day, in the cafeteria room, and to expect someone to walk into work and say to their manager or someone else, I kind of want a new manager and a new job internally.
Awkward.
It's like really awkward. It's like you kind of feel like you're giving the clue that you don't like your manager, whatever.
Right, you're cheating.
So it's just not. And then the result of that awkwardness is the company's internal mobility rates are probably going to be pretty low at most companies, even if they have the technology like Eightfold, without some sort of culture change. So, there's got to be some sort of proactive way the company is going after its own people. I know one of our customers, which is a tech company, has like a career week. It's a half week, I think. So like 3 days. And they do, they have speakers, they have like a mini conference internally, and they talk about careers, and they have people list the jobs they might want internally, and they kind of poach people internally and that kind of thing. So that's just like one effort, but there has to be some proactive reach out to your employees, because there's great people in the company who are not getting their potential realized because maybe they're not a fit with their manager or whatever it might be. You expect all the burden of that change to be on the employee, I think, is too much.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is change management is important as well as transparency inside the organization as well. Yeah. Good call out. All right, so we've got just a couple minutes left in our time together, and we want to make sure we get to this last section. So go ahead and pop up the poll. What's your biggest weekly time suck? And I truly think that there's a lot of things that suck our time away. So
Don't
feel
say
free
webinars.
to pick your top one. And I'm guessing that probably all of these are on your list, but pick your top one so we can see what you're struggling with. Figuring out lunch is tough, no matter if you're in the office or at home. That's always a challenge. Sometimes it's a granola bar because I just can't make that choice.
I was just about to say, if you have lunch, that's a positive.
That's right. That's right. All right, how are we looking, Kristen?
Okay, just a few more seconds. We're getting close.
Right.
All right.
Ooh, that's a pretty, there are a couple of people who have issues with lunch. Totally get it. May have to stock up on your granola bars or get your Uber Eats account going.
I think this is, sorry for interrupting you, but I think this is just a great dovetail with that one before. I want to say we had 47% of the people, the plurality, if I'm not mistaken, who said in the original question that their biggest issue was with hiring managers' expectations. And this kind of goes like really well along with that. It says that maybe they have high expectations, but they don't really communicate, you know, they don't like this person, but they don't tell you why, or, you know, they don't quite understand the issues and the challenges that recruiters are facing and so on. So this kind of actually matches up pretty well with that.
Yeah, and each bucket has a little bit in there, which I think is super interesting and probably really fair. So let's look at our last section here on how talent acquisition professionals are viewed. And so this is a question that I would ask my team and also ask leadership. If the only thing your TA team got paid for was hires, what would you change to make them successful? And that changes the conversation really quickly because you're now looking at what things can we take off their plate to get their number one job done, which is get folks hired. So whether that is focusing on those SLAs, getting your answers quickly, making sure that there's alignment all the way up and down the leadership chain, whether that is figuring out how to take reporting, how to automate that, how to take that off of your plate, what kind of technology can you use, or what kind of things are on your plate that are not value added? How do you get rid of those in order to make your life easier? This was I belong to a couple different talent acquisition Facebook groups. And this was one that came in that hit me pretty hard because this comment here wasn't about a hiring manager issue. It was more about candidates who are making life difficult, right? It's a hard space to be in right now. TA professionals get beat up from all sides, right? Expectations from leadership, from hiring managers, from peers, maybe from the team that reports to you, from external candidates. There's all kinds of things happening. And so what I just wanted to say on this one is, recruiter friends, I see you. We know you're tired. If no one else says it today, you're doing an amazing job and your work is valuable. Hang in there. So we get it. We see it. And so there are some things. Oh, go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to say that at the risk of sounding like a commercial for technology, because I don't think technology is the answer to every problem, but I do think technology can actually make you a little bit more human because when you spend less time doing the back and forth and the interview scheduling and those kinds of administration screening, you know, hundreds of resumes for one job and not spending much time on each. So when you kind of automate some of that, you do end up, our customers find, you do end up spending more time with humans and the top candidates. And so,
really
you know, I hate to sound like just a commercial for technology, but that is a technology, I think, is part of the answer of becoming more human, actually. And
yes, that's a great call out. So none of these, I think, on here feel like, whoa, this is something we've never heard before, but maybe you can grab the slide and take it to your leadership, or maybe this is a way for you to brainstorm among your peers or folks outside of your organization on how you might be able to add some of these things into your life. Increased recognition, we know, even if that's just a quick shout out in a team or a leadership meeting, leaders, if you're on this webinar, remember that everyone needs not just what have you done for me lately, right? It can't just be, hey, great job on that hire, what's next? So shout outs on all of the work that goes into getting these right folks into your organization. I talked already about this making recruiting a company responsibility. We looked at adding continuing education opportunities, and maybe that's a conference where you get a chance to talk to other folks, right? Especially as we're starting to meet more in person, seeing if you can get folks together and learn from each other. Conferences are a great way to do that, making sure you can attend those continuing education opportunities. Now, this tool fatigue, and that was one of the answers on the polls that have come up, and we're hearing this from a lot of our clients as well, is that there's a lot of tools out there that do a lot of things. How do you consolidate those? How do you get down to one or two things that work really well that it can encompass more of what you're doing? We understand you don't want to be in a whole bunch of different platforms all day long. So how do you figure out what's the most helpful? Reach out to your vendor partners, ask them for additional training, ask them capabilities, find out what's on their roadmap. You know, that's something that we try to do at Eightfold, is how do we take as much off of your plate as we can and put that all in one consolidated format? So if you can streamline your tools, that also helps, because you don't feel like you're in a whole bunch of different places. And then we've talked about this as well, is how do you add automation or reduce that non-value added work? Sailing in home, just a couple of minutes left here. So the next slide you see here, we're going to pop up the last poll. Before you go, do you want to learn more about how talent intelligence can help you solve your issues? Feel free to choose one of those two. If you pick yes, you'll get a connection from one of the folks on our team just to ask more questions and share with you a little bit more about Eightfold. And then our last slide here, Todd, you want to talk about that? What is Cultivate?
Cultivate's an annual event that we have. It's coming up. This year's is coming up in May. We did one last year in North America, and also one in Europe last year. If you sign up, cultivate.eightfold.ai, it's free. It's both in person in Napa, California, as well as online. And it's very interesting. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's very like hands-on, tales from the trenches kinds of stories about your peers, from your peers. Not about, it's not 2 days of hearing about a product. We've had really, really amazing speakers, EOC commissioner, very big name speakers, and lots of your peers who are talent acquisition and talent management leaders. So again, it's cultivate.eightfold.ai, and it's free.
Yeah, so feel free to sign up, ask us questions. I think, don't we have Josh Burson as one of our keynote speakers?
He's one of them as well.
Yay! So, all right, so Kristen, we've got 2 minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions, anything else you want to talk about before we wish everyone a great day?
No, that was fabulous as always. Thank you. And I just responded in the chat, but we will definitely share the slides. So someone asked about sharing the slides, so we'll get that out to you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you to Eightfold again for sponsoring and providing this amazing content. And I'm a little shocked by some of the poll results. So this has been a very exciting and fun time.
Interesting stuff. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if anyone wants to chat further.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.